We are live. Optimize Your Sleep Wearable Program gets incredible results. Average sleep score went from 66 to 87. HRV increased on average by 72%, and average deep sleep doubled across the 10-week program. If you're a biohacker, if you wear an Oura Ring, you've got to want to listen to this today and watch this today. This is biohacking news. Hello and welcome to Biohacking News. I'm Tony Wright, and before we go any further, please do like and subscribe. Lots of biohacking news, reviews, tech, techniques, supplements, science, and insider goss for you today. And just a reminder, biohacking uses natural, often forgotten secrets to optimize your energy, health, performance. And when nature isn't available, then we bring in a little bit of radical tech to help. And I've got an absolutely brilliant guest for you today. Molly Eastman is the founder of Sleep is a Skill and is doing this incredible work based around increasing people's sleep stats. Molly, great to have you on.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I so appreciate this.
Yeah, well, Molly, I'll be looking forward to talking to you. We've been planning this for a long time then. So, optimize your sleep. This is your wearable program. It's been getting incredible results. This is our top story today. Average sleep score went from 66 to 87. HRV increased by an average of 72%. This is the stuff I've been trying to do for 5 years with my Oura Ring. Average deep sleep doubled across the 10-week program. How do we do it? What have you been doing with these people?
Oh my goodness. Well, to clarify, in case anyone is listening and saying, well, I'll get exactly 70 something percent increase. So that is for a particular testimonial of someone that we worked with that had those type of results for their averages. So we'll see different types of averages depending on the struggles for different individuals. And as you know, someone that has been using the Oura Ring, there might be different things that we're really looking to optimize given the person. So for example, I have a particular niche in high stakes poker. And so I work with a lot of high stakes poker players of all things.
Yeah.
And I mention them because they're a great example of what I'm seeing a lot of, which is what I call the indoor issue, where so many of us have gone inside, literally. We have estimations from 2001 that the average person is spending at least around 93% of their time indoors. And so when we think about circadian rhythms and how to make our sleep wake kind of just work and then show up on those Oura Ring results, part of it is ensuring that we're interrupting some of these habits that have come out in modernity. And poker players are a great example of this. And they've are in casinos designed on purpose to confuse the circadian rhythm. But I think many of us aren't that far off from those individuals. And I share about them because they're an example of someone that some of the things that we might be improving for them might include sleep regularity, for example, a particular metric around how consistent is your sleep. We know that's really, really important for a number of, and even in recent years, certain studies coming out of looking at sleep regularity and sleep consistency as compared to sleep duration. And often, if you're given the choice, some of these newer research pieces of research seem to indicate that you might want to be choosing sleep consistency over just trying to go sleep as long as you possibly can when given the opportunity.
So Molly, let me just stop you for 1 sec because I want to know what exactly do you do with these people? So you've got this sort of database and you've become an expert on helping people improve their Oura Ring sleep stats. That's really what you do, isn't it?
That's what we do all day, every day. Every person that we work with is really required to wear the Oura Ring. Our new program is going to be bringing in Whoop, so that will be a new thing that we're bringing. But for years, it has been a large-scale database with Oura in particular. And what's fascinating about that is so much of it goes into exactly this conversation of what we call circadian rhythm entrainment. So in the program, it's an 8-week long program where we're bringing in the fundamentals of how do you strengthen and entrain your circadian rhythm. And this is a crucial thing for the average person to look at because most of us really do have struggles, even whether we know it or not, with our circadian health or circadian biology.
Yeah. Wow. So, I mean, and it's like I know the things over the years I've learnt to know the things that really help my sleep stats and my sleep scores and my HRV, which I'm utterly obsessed with on this thing.
Yeah. Totally.
But I sometimes sort of wonder, are they the same for everybody else that they are for me? And it probably not, is it? It probably varies across people.
Yes. Yeah, that's one of the really cool things that we get to see is from looking at hundreds and over at a certain point, depending if we're doing groups, over thousands of individuals. So we see a lot of data. And so we can see ranging. So when people start compare despairing with HRV, which of course is very common and understandable, but it can be a bit of a losing initiative because we see such variation with HRV. So I'll have clients that come in, their baseline is 11 HRV, and then I have clients that come in and their baseline is 120. So there's going to be a lot of variance, and on top of that, because it is a metric that literally has variability in the title, if we don't know what we're really optimizing for, it can create some stress, ironically, even though it's kind of measuring an element of stress in a particular various capacities. So we really want to be informed. That's why we say sleep is a skill in our modern society. So if, like any skill, let's start at kind of sleep 101 to help improve these results versus just being reactive each day when you look at your numbers and then making assumptions on how you should feel or be.
Yeah. So I had Dr. Andrew Hill on the podcast a couple of weeks ago,
Yeah,
and
great.
you know him, and he was talking about sleep scores and the Oura Ring as well, and he
Yeah.
just gave me a great reminder, which is I know when I eat late, I don't sleep as well. I feel like my belly's a bit full. I often get a bit hot, and my sleep stats aren't as good either. And he said he's wrapped up eating by about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, which
Yeah.
is quite early. But
Yeah.
but then, of course, since then I've sort of been playing with that, and my scores have shot up because
Of
I'm
course.
going to bed on a nice empty stomach. So is that one of the main things? Just eat a little bit earlier.
Yeah, and we have a hierarchy of the importance of things that we know that impact our circadian health. And so we know that that is one of them. So meal timing does act as a cue to your circadian rhythm of what time it is, on top of the added kind of homework that we're almost giving our body to do at night. If we're asking our body to digest while we're sleeping, it's kind of deviating and taking away from its ability to focus on all these other restorative properties and processes. But we do know that there is sort of an order of importance for these time givers, and they're also known as zeitgebers. But if you're looking at these time givers, it is fascinating because we know that light dark is one of the most impactful time givers on our circadian rhythm. So we always want to start there. Underneath that, we're looking at things like temperature timing, meal timing, exercise timing, drug timing, chronopharmacology, and even understanding things that I like to put in the bucket of thought timing. And that can be interactions with other individuals in our social network, but it can also be the types of thoughts that we're engaging in, which actually we have certain evidence that it appears that our thoughts even exist on a circadian rhythm. So you're going to have likely very different types of thoughts at 3 a.m. Then you're going to have at 3 p.m. And that is actually something that we can research and study. So there's a lot there. But to your point, certainly meal timing is one of the really powerful things that we see show up, especially on our trackers. What are some of the things that people might see if they don't know what to look for? Heart rate often going markedly up when we eat later. HRV, as you pointed to, often markedly going down. For some people, we might see things show up in deep sleep. Now, do know that the least accurate information and metrics on all wearables at the moment that are hand and wrist-based wearables is really chalks up to being our sleep stage classification. So deep sleep, REM, light sleep is how they often categorize those. But we can often at least get a sense of some of the trends as we look at their current algorithms.
Great. So I made a list of a few other things that affect my sleep, and I'm
Sure.
hoping that some people can take away a few ideas of how to improve their sleep, and if they do wear a wearable, improve their stats. And I'm interested that you're just before I go through that list, The Whoop band I do like, but I don't know if you can properly put it in airplane mode. That's my one problem with the Whoop
That's my one
band.
problem too. I know
Yeah.
that's been one of the reasons why I've held off on as much interaction with them. And for myself, I've had one, and I've certainly tested with them so that I can still speak to the information, because we do know that so many people are choosing Whoop, and love some of the work that they're doing from a research perspective, the team that they've got over there. And I'm hoping and assume that they're hearing some of the requests from different individuals on how can we just have the airplane mode option if we would like to be able to use it. Now, granted, there are options, but sometimes the ease of those. So like Aura makes it pretty easy to be able to have that on airplane and really not miss out on a lot of your information and not have it kind of have hiccups by kind of streaming all that data through. So Aura is one that we do like to go to for that reason.
Yeah, I've got an Ultra Human Ring here as well, and
Oh,
I've
sure.
been speaking to them as well. That's interesting. That's another one you can't put in airplane mode. But again, they've had so many requests from us boring biohackers
I
to
know.
put it into airplane mode. I think that is a feature they are actively working on, and that's an interesting one. It does a lot of stuff. Interesting interface on the app as well, and that's one to look for as well. So here's one thing that massively affects my sleep. One glass of alcohol, oh my goodness,
Totally.
completely destroys my heart rate variability overnight.
Yeah.
And even I could even look at a glass of tequila and my HRV would be through the
Say,
floor and my heart rate would be up.
yeah, absolutely. So that's one of the most reliable things that we see. So if anyone's listening and they've are tracking their sleep at all, and if they ever have a drink of alcohol or a couple drinks, they've likely seen this. But if people are listening and they are not tracking their sleep, which we also do interact with a lot of people that they're not tracking their sleep, or maybe they're tracking curious. One thing to know is that that's one of the most common things that we see as a result of people. Kind of their biggest takeaways often is, wow, I had no idea how much of a hit. I knew I didn't maybe feel the best the night after a drink or what have you. But when you see the information, people will say, wow, okay, I'm likely, if I keep wearing this and if I keep playing this game of optimizing my sleep, usually over time, that just starts going down and down the frequency by which people are having those for most individuals if they're really in that game. And why that goes in the bucket of chronopharmacology. So the timing of our drugs, what are popular drugs that a lot of people are engaging in that could impact their sleep. Of course, alcohol is going to be a big one. So you could play with also the timing, but I would not want to undermine the fact or minimize the fact that I still will see people often move their alcohol earlier and it's
Okay.
still often showing up. But I would say if you were to ever engage in that, this would be my official recommendation would be boozy brunch, a happy
Yeah.
hour, an early
Yeah.
happy hour, right? But that's just playing with the timing of things, and timing is crucial because we just certainly do not want just a few hours before bed to take something that can so markedly uptick heart rate, lower HRV, and then impact our sleep results. And we do have research that does seem to point to people's kind of thinking where they say this will help me sleep. They're struggling, they're stressed, maybe gone through a breakup or whatever, and they choose, I just need a drink to get some sleep. And we do see that often it does support sleep latency in an odd way, where many people
Okay.
will
Yeah.
fall asleep faster, but that's kind of often where all of it starts ending as far as the good news, where then we wait a couple hours, and that's where you often see those multiple wake ups. Your body temperature is very likely to go up, and you'll see that usually on some of your trackers if they track for that. And just that fragmentation. And we know that sleep fragmentation is so damning to our ability to get great sleep. And the amount of people that are running around with undiagnosed sleep disorders is like a big problem. We know that by different accounts, there's over 100 different sleep-wake disorders by various groups that categorize, the different types of sleep-wake disorders. That's a lot of disorders, but especially things like respiratory-based disorders, so sleep apnea and certain things. And so add alcohol on top of that, so you're likely to see that snoring going up, mouth breathing, and apneas. So this can be a big problem. And I think so many people just don't know that they are dealing with this. The amount of people that I've worked with that say, oh, I don't have that. That's not me. We test them. Yes, they do, very commonly. So I'm a big proponent as well, if we're talking about sleep optimization, that one of the first places to begin is I would like to see a future where everyone is tested, not just once, but multiple times for sleep disorders. Because even if you were tested a couple years ago and you say, oh, I was clear, I was fine, as you age, or if you put on a little weight or hormonal shifts occur, and it doesn't have to be just weight related, by the way, we can actually develop things like sleep apnea or other sleep disorders over time.
Yeah, I've noticed one, and I saw that on your Instagram, and I thought that was really very interesting, actually. I've certainly noticed that when I've stayed in a place that's got a bit of damp or a bit of mold, that massively affects my sleep. And one of the things that I haven't heard many people talking about is that when there's a good ready supply of fresh air in a bedroom, then I always sleep a lot better, and my stats show it as well. And it's nice being here in Portugal because, of course, very mild evenings, you keep the window open all the time. Whereas in England, in the middle of winter, you got the window open, you're absolutely freezing. So that's been quite nice. But have you ever heard anyone talk about fresh air? Because that's actually makes a big difference.
Yeah, it's a big deal because it's multifaceted. So one, we've had a number of building biologists on the podcast who will speak to today, right? So many of us, especially it's this catch-22 because newer, more energy efficient homes often tend to trap and not breathe as well. The analogies are often like a Tupperware case or something. It's just closing up and there's no way for a lot of that air to ventilate in the same ways. Now, of course, there's procedures to aim to help with circulation, but as far as getting outdoor fresh air in, my point being, is sometimes hindered, and for good reason too. They're trying to keep in the temperature control and what have you. But for biology's sake, some of the concerns are as follows. So one, if you're in a bedroom and you close your door and everything's kind of blocked in, and you have a certain amount of that air to breathe, and then as the number of people that are in that bedroom are expelling, so we're breathing throughout the course of the night, that could shift the kind of ratio that we're playing with of that fresh quality air, the more individual, and that includes like pets, kids, all the things, and in those small confined spaces. So we have a lot of building biologists that will really work to make sure, bare minimum, we've got some strong air purifiers in the space. If we can kind of set up different systems where, to your point, if it's available to us to open these windows or what have you, great. But then the other thing we deal with for sleep is really trying to play with that temperature aspect of things like you're speaking to. So that one can get tricky because some of the recommendations from the Sleep Foundation are between 60 to 67 degrees for your ambient temperature. And sometimes that can be hard for people to achieve. But if available to you, we do see in a number of studies that your sleep is going to improve as a result of hitting that right balance with that temperature. But sometimes it's hard because if we have the fresh air element, how do we modulate that? Now, in the past, we would have been sleeping outside. So any changes in temperature, we would have been naturally a part of throughout all that 24-hour cycle. So if it was warmer, you would have felt the thing we're looking to play with is that, that true difference and hitting that shift. So like if you're outside all day and it's 80 degrees, and then it drops down in the evening, you've been a part of that market raise in body temperature and then that drop. We're looking for that drop because it's there that helps tell the body it's time for sleep and to sleep better, right?
Yeah. Let's look. That's absolutely fascinating. Then I'm glad I'm not the only one in terms of fresh air, and I do feel like, I don't always like the air that comes out of an air conditioning unit, but I feel like when the aircon is on and it's cooler, I don't necessarily feel like I sleep any better, but my sleep stats look better. My HRV looks better. So
100%. And it's one of, if available, I know that this is an investment and I grew up with not a lot of money. And so I hate making recommendations that are kind of pricey, but I do think of this one as an investment. If people can get cooling mattress toppers, we see that is one of the few things. Oh my gosh. They
look so ugly though. You got a big unit at the end of the bed and you're sleeping on a sort of wobbly.
They are getting better with the kind of design. So 8 Sleep is one that I will say definitely has the more chic kind of sexy look. But depending, whatever you go with, What I like about that is that it's one of the few that I don't have a lot of gadgets that I can really point to after looking at hundreds to, in different cases, over thousands of individuals with their Oura Ring data. I don't have a lot of cases where, you start using some gadget and then suddenly you see some huge blip. Often it's really not the case. However, cooling mattress toppers or mattresses that allow you to cool, that bring that within the mattress, that is one where we'll often see pretty reliable changes where heart
Wow.
rate tends to go down, HRV tends to go up. And depending on the different algorithms, we often can see improvements in deep sleep as well. Again, it's less accurate of information, but certainly in that kind of readiness section if we're talking about Aura. And why? Well, temperature is, like I said, there's a hierarchy. So the light dark is such a huge piece. And so many people, I think when I say that, people are just like, snooze past it, but don't realize what it really takes to set up our environment so that you truly get brighter days and darker nights. But that one is huge. You always want to be given there. And then underneath that is temperature. And we know that because our body temperature is not static throughout the whole course of the day. There's this dynamic nature to it. And again, all of these things get handled when you're outside. When you live an outdoor lifestyle and you're not going in this indoor problem, this indoor issue that I'm speaking to, because you would naturally feel the shift, because when the sun is out, it gets warmer. And when it drops, anyone that's like spent a day at the beach and then suddenly, the sun goes away and it's cold and you need a sweater and the sand's cold, it's just so obvious. But we don't feel that indoors because it's like perfectly 70 degrees or whatever it is. So we need to be guiding our body and try to mimic what's happening outside, inside. And so if you think about our modern bedding, it is very weird as compared to how we would have slept outside, most likely on the ground, which would have been kind of its own natural cooling mattress topper, because when sleeping on the ground be one of the coolest places in the environment. So now that we've gone indoors and many of us are sleeping on like foam mattresses with a big duvet on top. And what are we doing? Kind of rotisserie chicken cooking within there all night long. And and then we wonder why we're waking up all the time and we're dealing with all these extra things because we've gotten so divorced from our kind of original natures.
Yeah. That is why I said at the start of the podcast, biohacking really uses natural, often forgotten secrets to optimize your health and energy and sleep and lifestyle. And then when nature isn't available, when we can't go and lie on the ground outside, we have to get a very expensive device to sit on top of our bed. And that cools us down instead.
Exactly, because it feels so like, oh, come on, do you really need some fancy thing to sleep? But really, to your point, we're hearkening back to how it was. And I feel, biohacking is such this interesting relationship, at least for me, of I'm so grateful for the creation of this kind of category, because it's allowed people to look differently at health and kind of take health into their own hands. And at the same time, I would love to see almost like a biohacking 2.0, like a rebranding for the topic at the same time, because I think many people, to your point, don't know how much of it is going into some of these real lasting foundational changes versus just trying to get a quick, fix.
Yeah, that's something I've really grappled with this podcast, actually, because I've been doing my podcast for about 10 years. And initially, I sort of resisted identifying as a biohacker because of that. And then I realized so many people were using that term. I was like, I'll just use it. And actually, I am at pains to emphasize that most people in our world, it's really about the quite boring stuff, isn't it? Going to bed on time, turning down the lights in the evening, eating well, not eating too late, and all the sort of fundamentals, lots of exercise. It's the boring stuff, but it's actually the stuff that works the best. Then after that, we can talk about 8 sleep.
Exactly. And that's so good, because I actually just recorded some stuff for social media, and that was kind of something I was harping on, is how very often, again, after looking at so many individuals' data, it's very rare that I see someone find some magical supplement for their sleep or what have you that's going to move the needle. It is almost always the thing that really shows like, wow, what did this person do? Their HRV is up. Their sleep consistency is amazing. Their sleep scores are great. They're ready. Like, what happened? Almost always it is, we peel back the layers and it's the boring stuff, as you pointed to. And the consistency of those boring things, not just like 3 times a week, 4 times a week, or, every so often. it is keeping that as a lifestyle that we really see lasting change.
Yeah. Just one more on the Oura Ring. I went to Thailand last year and recorded this podcast in Thailand for a few months. Me and the
I used
family
to
went.
live there for a
Did
stretch
you?
of time. Yeah, so in and out for about 3 years. So I didn't mean to interrupt,
Oh,
but
great.
I got
Yeah.
excited because my husband and I, for about 3 years, we were living back and forth in Southeast Asia, back to New York. And Thailand was one of like our big hubs because it's just so great for digital nomad sort of working, living lifestyles. Yeah,
Oh,
great.
it
Okay.
was brilliant. And I have never seen such an uptick in my sleep stats.
Same.
From the day I got there, they were so good. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to replicate that anywhere else. They were just so good. But I was waking at 6 a.m. I didn't need more than 6.5 hours sleep. I could listen to the mad sounds of the jungle outside, getting loads of good quality light. The temperature was so lovely. I think the whole thing was just so good for my entire physiology, really.
That's exactly what I should do a post on this. I still have not been able to replicate this whole stretch of time when we lived right on the beach. It was like completely connected to those rhythms. Arguably, controversially, maybe grounding every day, low EMFs. Swimming in the mineral rich oceans. Eating fresh foods, the number of things, joy. We had one doctor on the podcast who referred to HRV as your joy score, looking at the stress, kind of elements psychological stress elements as opposed to the physiological stress, or maybe combined, and how that can show up in your HRV. But however it shook out, some of my best stats absolutely are there. We've been hired to the Thailand tourism board.
The stats were just so good.
Yeah, totally.
Now, on a similar theme, the next story that I have today is this blue light study that's been exploring subjects who read for 90 minutes on a smartphone in the evening, either with or without a filter or from a book. And they've assessed people using polysomnography and body temperature measurements, in addition to evaluating cortisol, melatonin, and sleep levels before and after sort of dropping off. And they found out reduced slow wave sleep and increased cortisol awakening response after reading on a smartphone without a filter. So how much do you think blue light blocking glasses, filters in general, and one of the reasons I wanted to ask you this is that Dr. Andrew Hill was fairly dismissive of blue light blocking glasses a couple of weeks ago.
Yes, I totally know. We had him on the podcast, and I love some of the work that they're doing. I have a number of clients that have worked with them. I've learned some fascinating things by using their QEEG mapping. Interesting things like having a paradoxical response to caffeine was a really interesting thing I found. So I've been trying to kind of switch over to more matcha or L-theanine with caffeine. So lots of interesting things. And light and our circadian health. I will die on this. What is the saying? On this hill.
On the hill. You pick this hill to die on.
That to assume and to discount the boatload of studies that point to the impact of light, and I can actually quantify this a little bit for us. So just last year, in 2023, nearly 248 circadian scientists. This is all they do, right? It's like their reputation on the line, and what their specialty is in our circadian health. So 248 circadian scientists came together to pull for the scientific consensus and to uphold the scientific consensus, where they were referencing nearly 2,700 peer-reviewed publications, and they're calling for what? They're calling for warning labels on light bulbs when used at night. So why would they just willy-nilly, put all of their reputations on the table if this was not impactful? Now, what are they citing as their reasons for why it would be warranted to actually look at this conversation of warning labels on light bulbs at night? It wasn't just sleep, and certainly sleep was in that list, but it also pointed to maybe some surprising things like obesity, diabetes, reproductive disorders, cancers, psychiatric disorders, so our well-being. So all of these things by simply using light bulbs at night. Why is this so big of a deal? Well, I mentioned a couple times this circadian health, and I truly believe this is going to be one of the next big things in wellness. It's starting to get into more of some of certainly the conversations we're in, but as far as expanding the aperture so that the average person is talking about this, I really believe that this will start rippling out bigger. Um, but as for right now, our understanding of how much we're impacted when we're not having those brighter days or darker nights I alluded to. So in that same scientific consensus, the kind of what they put out as a position was that the average person, so we know that people living indoors with electric light is a very high number. So it appears to be somewhere in like the 99% of people on the globe. So we're talking about just this being a topic for pretty much everyone, unless you live outside and you camp or something. And so for just about everyone, the takeaway in that consensus was that the average person's light environment by day is about 100 times too dim as compared to our outdoor environments that we would have evolved under. And at night, about 100 times too bright as compared to even the brightest moonlit evenings of yesterday, right?
Wow.
So what does that mean? That means that just about every person that's living inside with electric light at night is dealing with some form of circadian disruption. So it is the screens, but it's not just the screens. And there is some controversy around the screens. It depends on how bright the screen, what's the time you're looking at, what are you looking at? There's a lot of questions of what is the stimulus part, what is keeping people up or stressed or feeling it the next day or impacting that sleep quality. But certainly the ambient light, the bright blue lit light bulbs, and we know that the average person is under often pretty much LED light bulbs for the most part, maybe a little fluorescence, but incandescent light bulbs were made illegal in the United States, at least just last year. So you can't even properly buy those unless you're, being on some sort of black market or something. And why does that matter? Because LEDs have a huge shot of blue rich light, because sometimes people just make these blanket statements about like, oh, light is bad and what have you. It's like, well, what kind of light? How close are you to that light? If we are to look at the wavelengths of that light, if we look to the lux of that light. So light is very, you can have a whole podcast or you can have a whole class on just the physics of light and then understanding the biological impacts. But to keep it simple, we want to aim to have brighter days, which really requires us getting outside. So as I'm talking to you, I'm behind these windows. And if I was to just rest on my laurels and say, well, I'm getting bright light because these windows are here. No, if I was to measure the wavelengths of light, they are shifted when light comes through these windows. I know you know these things, but as they're coming through, this is adulterating the type of light. So it's not impacting me in the same way. So I need to get myself physically outside and get that light in my eyes, directly connected to that suprachiasmatic nucleus that is acting as that master clock to these trillions of other clocks in virtually every cell and organ in our body, these peripheral clocks. So it's a big deal. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people maybe aren't as connected to some of the research on how much this shows up in not just sleep. And of course, sleep in this conversation is going to be important, but I'm really also interested in all the other rippling effects to just your experience of life. If we're talking about psychiatric disorders from simply having a light bulb on at night, I mean, we want to be mindful of these things.
And you're the only other person I know who has a bit of cutout red theatre grade camera gel on your Kindle, which I've got as well.
That. Because,
but the thing is, the Kindle, the latest Kindle actually has a night mode on it, and the night mode is pathetic. It's not good enough, is it?
Totally. Yeah.
No.
Absolutely. I mean, and I think so. One thing to further emphasize, like, why is this so impactful? Commonly, a couple of studies are referenced out of the University of Colorado, and what they did was they took night owls camping. And those night owls that they took camping said, oh, I can't fall asleep until, way later. But as they take them outside, and so they're exposed to very bright days, because we know that the bright light by day helps you produce melatonin at night, but then total darkness at night, no electric light of any type. They measured their melatonin production, and they found that within just a few days, they started markedly moving back their kind of pulse, their melatonin pulse, so that they're able to fall asleep hours in advance and kind of phase advance. It's referred to as moving your clock and the latency time and the time by which you fall asleep earlier. And that was simply by the presence of just very bright days, very dark nights. And so it does interrupt, and it's kind of an inconvenient thing for us to think about for the people that are very big on, and I used to be like this too, chronotypes. Well, I'm a night owl, and that's just how it is for me. But then continuing to perpetrate behaviors, maybe unbeknownst to us, I used to do all the things, have the lights on late, eat late, a glass of wine to relax, all of these sort of things that maybe we don't quite realize that could be phase delaying us. So meaning that we're pushing our time by which we're getting sleepy later.
Yeah. I love that study. They ended up going to bed about 2.5 hours earlier and sleeping for about 2.5 hours longer. So we actually do all need to go and camp in the Rocky Mountains. We don't need any sleep gadgets. We don't need a mattress. We just need to lie on the ground.
Lie on the ground.
No devices in the evening. And it sounded lovely, didn't it?
Yeah.
They went camping on a 2-week holiday with no tech.
Yes. And they did it first on a long week. And then the second time they did it was a long weekend. And even both times, they were pretty shocked, even on that shorter stretch of time, that they were still able to move that bedtime so much earlier. So it's really impactful.
It's funny, actually, because I think my best HRV last year was when I was at Glastonbury Festival. And I was camping. But I went to bed about 2:00 in the morning. And I might have had a few drinks. So I don't know, but it was just lying on the ground.
So wild. I think, it just goes to show that, first of all, sleep as an area of research is still relatively new. So that's something to be aware of in and of itself. And understanding that sleep as a true area of study didn't really come into vogue until the Industrial Revolution. So that's not that long ago. And part of the reason that it came into vogue was because of electric light. The electric light has only been around 145 years. So for anyone to make kind of claims that we unequivocally know about the impacts of light is a little short-sighted, considering we've been on the globe for thousands of years, or different types of Homo sapiens, and if we extend, so we've been on the earth for a long, long time. And to think that when we look at 145 years, that's a blip of time. That's like not even a fingernail if we're looking at the length of time that we've been on this planet. And so 145 years, and that's a very different type of light than most of us are under today. So I believe it's very important for us to explore this, because it's one of the reasons that we saw people starting to deal with an uptick of things like insomnia, difficulty falling asleep and staying asleep. And that's when people started looking at sleep as more of a true science, relatively not that long ago.
Now, we've been nattering on, and I haven't asked you yet about biohacking event season, which has started. It is underway. I want to ask you briefly, because there's loads going on. There's Hack Your Health by KetoCon. That is May 31st to June the 2nd in Austin. There's the Biohacking Conference, which is the same weekend in Dallas. And then there's the Health Optimization Summit, 15th of 16th of June in London. Hack Your Health 2024 in Austin. Speakers include Max Lugavere, Ben Greenfield, Molly Eastman. There she is.
Yes. I love that event. This will be my second time speaking there, and such a big fan of the organizers and the people that come along for that. So cannot wait for that. And it actually happens to be the day I'm speaking. The very next day, I go to Sleep 2024, which maybe could use some extra press in the conference, in the mainstream anyway. And so that is a full conference just on sleep. And then I'll be hosting co-hosting with some other great friends and podcasters and content creators, a kind of rise and shine content and coffee event at Sleep 2024 to bring together some of the, believe it or not, there are a little mighty troop, a small troop of people that are creating sleep specific content, and we'll be kind of hanging out with them as well there. But yes, tons of events happening.
Yeah. I guess they're all organized for May or June, because July and August people want to go on their summer holidays. But, there's a great lineup at Hack Your Health. Really impressive lineup. Luke Story's there, JJ Virgin, a lot of former podcast guests on this podcast. Then you've got the biohacking conference, which I've been to a few times. Dave Asprey always puts on a good event. And my memories of drinking bulletproof coffee in Pasadena in 2016 and 2017, very, very fond memories.
Yeah. Oh, that's incredible. OG, totally. Yep.
And then the Health Optimization Summit, which I am hosting the main stage in London. That's a couple of weeks later. Are you coming over for that one or not?
I don't think I'm going to be able to. I've been traveling so much and I've got so much travel coming up. And it's one that I haven't been to yet. So I really need to get myself there in the future, but it just might be next year, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that'd be great. Yeah. I mean, good lineup. Gary Brecker, Jim Quick, Zach Bush, which I think will be excellent. And again, Ben Greenfield and Dr. Stephen Gundry as well. So there's a lot going on at the moment in the biohacking world. This is the month of conferences. And for people who haven't been before, it's less of a conference and more of a festival, isn't it? It's just so much fun.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's just so cool to be around, such like-minded people. And, it's so great to be connected more with you because I know we've been connected on social. So it's so great to learn more and to be around people like our people that are just fascinated of these the opportunity for us to really live our greatest versions of ourselves in whatever capacity or path that takes us. And I think that's a great conversation to be in.
And there are some good parties.
And there are some good parties, exactly, with lots of options. And so if we don't want to wreck our HRV, like could we use some hard ketones or some kava or, different state changers and then still wake up feeling pretty decent, hopefully, the next day.
Are you going to be one of these people who brings your blue blocking glasses to the party in the evening?
I've always got my blue blockers packed away. It's so ridiculous. What I have? I don't have them over here, but I do have one pair. You definitely have seen these. The blue blockers that have the the magnets, so you can just put on each layer.
Oh, I know them. Yeah, the Viva Rays. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So you can start out with the yellow, and then as the night progresses, orange, and then you can go to red if you're getting crazy.
Very cool. Yeah,
I know. So wild.
Yeah, I like Viva Rays. Now, before we go, we want you to review something for us.
Yes,
What
please.
is your review going to be today?
My review is going to be on the Oura Ring. I know we alluded to it, so we can go in more deeply.
Yeah. So I've been wearing an Oura Ring for about 5 years, and I like the way you can now view your Oura Ring stats by year. Tell people what you love about it. Very briefly go over what it is, and anything else you feel is relevant, and I'll chip in with my thoughts.
Please, yes. Okay, so one, I believe that if we are tracking this area of our health, our sleep, we need, I believe, to have some data around what are we been talking about? Because the average person just is not very good, myself included, any of us, or we're just not very good at being able to share about our sleep during a time when we're in an altered state. How are we going to know? So as we actually gather some data, there could be different call outs of, well, it's not akin to an in-lab readout. And that may be true. There's certain shortcomings for lots of different trackers that are looking at sleep. But I will say they keep getting better and better. And one of the reasons that I'm pointing to Oura Ring in particular is just recently what they're able to point to is 1,500 days as compared to a sleep lab. That's why they're able to kind of say that it's like having a sleep lab on your finger, because they fared quite well as compared to a sleep lab. Wow. And by the way, a sleep lab still has a lot of questions or discrepancy as far as some of the readouts. And so when we talk about sleep stage classifications, deep sleep, REM, et cetera, often the agreement on what stage people are in can still be within around the 80s, like mid 80s, as far as agreement there. So it's not even if it's like, batting 100 in a sleep lab, it's already kind of questionable as far as some of the thoughts on that. And so as compared to an Oura Ring, it was logging about 79% accuracy for the sleep stage classification. So that's not that different from, 83, 85% agreement. So that's one thing about the Oura Ring. Another thing is we're arguing this kind of this vital sign, then getting this information, not just about what time did you go to sleep, what time did you wake up, which are actually really important as well. So that's a big deal. And that's where they shine a bit more as far as the accuracy. It tends to be more in like around the low 90s as far as knowing like, are you asleep or are you awake? Usually pretty solid. And so understanding that part, but then also some of the things that you were speaking to, like these readiness indicators. So temperature, our HRV, our heart rate, our respiratory rate, how many breaths you're taking per minute while you're sleeping, blood oxygen. All of these things can just give us a bit more of a sense of our nervous system and how our nervous system is behaving. So I found this to be really, really helpful too for people that can trend, say, anxious or depressed, or just, can't most of us have different periods of time where our moods and states might be changing. So to have that external place to look and say, oh, wow, I didn't even realize I'm headed towards burnout, like until I see some of these numbers, heart rate's going up, HRV's going down. Maybe it's time for me to kind of, put the laptop down or whatever. And so some of these things can really help us with the management of our health and well-being. The other reason I really like this is the amount of times that by looking at these readouts, I've been able to unequivocally say, all right, we have enough signs here, because it's not diagnostic, it's a consumer grade piece of tech, but it can give us enough signs or red flags that we should get tested for some sort of sleep disorder. And we've been able to then have many individuals come out realizing, oh, wow, I didn't realize I had narcolepsy. I didn't realize I had sleep apnea. I didn't realize I had restless leg. I didn't realize I had periodic limb movement disorder. I mean, the amount of things that can come out as a result that you might not have had the oomph to go get tested for without seeing these numbers day in, day out. So those are just some reasons. Additionally, for women of menstruating age, this can be a really helpful kind of partner in crime to have to track your cycle, because then we can get a sense of really some marked changes that might be at play and some hormonal shifts. So you can use this as kind of a really fantastic guide in that process, as well as someone who might travel frequently. You can notice just the massive difference that various environments can have on your sleep. I mean, I could keep going, but these are some of the reasons why I really like this as a way to have a gauge on your health. And the last thing I'll say on that point is I've had people every age tracking with their Oura Ring. I think one of my oldest participants was in their early 90s wearing an Oura Ring and loving their Oura Ring. But I had one individual that I think it was around I think 73 or so, and he loved this thing. And so one of the things that he started noticing after tracking for years was then his HRV started markedly dipping. And he'd go to the doctors, they'd say, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine. But because that it was so obvious that he kept at it until he did find a doctor who discovered he had cancer. And with that, then he was able to treat that with velocity. And they were all kind of acknowledging him for being so quick to discovering this, because of that velocity, then he is now doing great. He's not dealing with cancer anymore. It's just an anecdotal story, but I'm pointing to the fact that it can help you really get at the helm of your health.
Yeah. Wow. How annoying is it though when you sleep great and you wake up in the morning and your Oura Ring has run out of battery?
Oh, totally. I know. Yeah. And there are, there's pluses and minuses to all these things. Oura Ring has had a bit of a bug, I would say, where some of their different generations have had battery issues. So for some people, they have sent those out, and sometimes it will be covered, sometimes not. But so often, hopefully, if you are someone listening and your battery is dying like really quickly, you might be able to get that replaced. I'm not a spokesperson for Oprah. Oh my God, for Oura Ring.
That's funny you say that, because they just messaged me the other day. I messaged them about something else, and they said, "Oh, by the way, it looks like your battery isn't very good. We'll send you a new one." So they sent me a new one in the post.
Exactly.
Great.
Yes,
yeah, I didn't ask for it, but they sent me one. So.
Oh, I'm so happy, because you shouldn't have to deal with it, because that's one of the things that's really great about it, actually, is because I have other clients that use, or I've had other people come my way that were using Apple Watch or certain other trackers, and they were having to charge it so frequently, and it became so they'd have a lot of holes in their data because it was just hard to get down. Whereas this should be lasting quite a few days in between each charge.
Yeah. Molly, great to chat. I love what you do. I love following you on Instagram. Where can people find you, all your posts, and also potentially enroll in one of your studies to boost their Oura Ring stats from 66 to 87% sleep score?
Amazing. Well, one, the feeling is mutual. I love the work that you're putting out. So great to be connected with you. I know we're going to have you on our podcast too, to go in and even more deeply on your areas of expertise. So cannot wait. And thank you so much for having me on here. It's truly my mission on the planet to help support people with their sleep. I know I didn't really share my story exactly, but I went through a whole, really one of the lowest points in my life, this big rock bottom period, was around sleep. And so in that process, felt so hopeless, helpless, embarrassed, ashamed, all kinds of things of like, well, why? What do I do? But also fearful that I was going to be down a path of sleeping pills or pharmaceuticals and all kinds of things. And so I truly believe that we have this opportunity to actually, when you are struggling with your sleep, if you are struggling with your sleep or however you relate to it, that it can serve as a huge shift and a transformation if we start to prioritize this. Really, I believe above all else, if you start here from such a strong foundation, then a lot of these other things can kind of just like work, like we were talking about, like that foundation piece. So to that point, my commitment is to get out a lot of information and a lot of free information for people. So we do have a weekly newsletter. It's been going out for almost 6 years, every single Monday, never missed a Monday, called Sleep Obsessions. Would love to have you on there. And that's at sleepisaskill.com. We also have our weekly podcast with lots of great experts, and you will be one of those on there. So anyone listening, please check out that. We'll be doing that shortly. And then beyond that too, and yes, we're trying to get out more information on social and all those fun things. So beyond, I'm definitely passionate about different ways we can work individually with people or as a group. So our Optimize Your Sleep program, 8-week long live program, you are wearing an Oura Ring or newly Whoop if you so choose, throughout those 8 weeks. And the commitment is that you come in with a set of stats in the beginning and leave with a whole other set of stats by the end. Let's go. Let's gamify this. And then have really tools that you're continuing to build and develop and gain mastery on, like any skill, just keep improving over time thereafter. And then we also have one-on-ones as well if people would really like more bespoke experience.
That's a really cool idea. And I don't know that anyone else is doing that. So that's great.
Well and because you're saying that you've experienced too, like I'm sure there's a collection of behaviors that you've shifted simply by beginning to focus on this area, the old cliche, like what gets measured gets managed, or however you want to look at it, but just the process of looking at a particular area. And I can't think of a more impactful, important area to begin with to really develop.
Molly, lovely to talk to you. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much. The feeling is mutual.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for watching live. And this will be on the podcast very soon. See you later. Bye.